Let's start with the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. We have number 4 Alabama against number 1 Michigan. The Wolverines are a 1.5 favorite in this game, and it carries an over-under of 44.5 points, an expected defensive struggle on hand here. It kicks off Monday, January 1st at 5 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. That's the one thing I love about the Rose Bowl, that it probably makes more sense to have these two games flip-flopped in terms of time slot, but the Rose Bowl sets up their kickoff so that the sun goes down as we move into the fourth quarter. I love that that is a constant. I think no matter what happens as we move forward, that is going to be the case. Now, whether it's always on New Year's Day or not is up for debate, but that time slot is key because you get the sun setting over the mountains and all that. Of course, it's played in college football, in my opinion's most romantic place, the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena, California. Jim Harbaugh is still seeking his first college football playoff win. He's 0 for 2 in the last 2 seasons. Alabama has not lost a college football playoff semifinal game since the inaugural one in 2014. This is a team that when they make the semifinal, you can almost chalk them up as a participant in the national championship. Now, a couple of injury notes here. Of course, we're not dealing with opt-outs, but injury notes. Michigan is without their top offensive lineman. Zach Zinter suffered a scary injury, a very severe injury in the Ohio State game. He did not play in the Big Ten Championship, and he will not play in this. Alabama was without a key defensive lineman, Tim Smith, in the SEC Championship game. He's had a month to recover, so maybe we'll see him suit up for this one. Haven't really heard anything on the contrary. Now, there has not been much line movement on any of these numbers yet, but I think that we'll see some later. But so far, pretty static. Both teams have issues protecting their quarterbacks. They have all year. That's kind of been the one Achilles heel if you can find a fault in either of these teams. And then they're going against 2 ferocious pass rushes. I mean, you're dealing with the other side, has one of the best pass rushes in the entire country on either side. Milroe is a little bit more cause for his own sacks than J.J. McCarthy is, because he likes to drop back real far, throw the long ball. He holds on the ball a lot of time, but the offensive lines are not perfect by any stretch. Which one of these quarterbacks holds on to the football, takes care of the football better, I think is a big deal, a big swing in this game. However, both teams don't turn the ball over. I mean, both of these quarterbacks are what I like to call turnover adverse until they're not. You know, we saw J.J. McCarthy last year, couple of really bad turnovers. Quinn Ewers earlier in the year had some really bad turnovers. All of these quarterbacks that are participating in the playoff are turnover adverse until they are not. A concern that I have for Michigan outside of that offensive line is, how does the offense perform? In their first 6 Big Ten games, they were scoring 45 points a clip, that being against Rutgers, Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan State, and Purdue. Now, not great competition, but Minnesota, Nebraska, Rutgers, decent defenses that have held opposing offenses to peanuts. In their final 4 Big Ten games, that dropped below 28 points per game, that being against, of course, Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State, and Iowa. Much better defenses than what they saw early in the year. Against Penn State, Michigan just opted not to throw the football. And granted, they didn't have to, but I don't think you're going to be able to get away with that in this semifinal. J.J. McCarthy cannot throw. You're not going to be able to run this ball into oblivion and run timeout and win the game. Against Iowa, McCarthy had just 147 yards passing. The wide receivers weren't open because the wide receivers aren't elite. Can they get that same separation against Alabama? I don't know that Alabama's secondary is as good as Iowa's, perhaps. At least the numbers would suggest that Iowa's a little bit better of a defense, but boy, there's not much of a difference between those two groups. Georgia, if you're looking at the how Alabama can be slowed down, Georgia removed the deep pass with their all-SEC safeties, super physical corners, and then they double-spied Jalen Milroe. Just be like, you are absolutely not going to beat us with your legs, and it works. Now, Michigan corners are plenty physical. That's what they hang their hat on. They're nasty. They're physical. They'll punch you in the mouth at the line of scrimmage, and then they'll be able to reroute those receivers, force Milroe to hold on the ball a little bit longer. That does let the pass rush get home, which we just talked about. May be a lopsided affair for Michigan's defensive line, but Michigan safeties are not quite Georgia's. Now, Georgia probably has the best tandem of safeties in the country. So can Michigan take away that deep shot? Are they skilled enough to be able to completely remove that, force the middle throw, which Jalen Milroe is not very good at, and force maybe some overthrows over the middle of the field? Michigan on offense, their biggest fastball last year was the tandem and the explosiveness from Blake Corum and especially Donovan Edwards. My goodness, was he a spark of electricity. But both of these guys appear not to be 100% all year long. Now, Corum punched in a ton of touchdowns to the goal line. He's a beast around the goal line, super physical, very good. But Donovan Edwards went from 7.5 a carry to 3.4 a carry. That was cut in half. He's clearly not super healthy right now. He only has 44 breakaway yards of 15 or more yards on the season. That's just 2 rushes that would be categorized as breakaway, down from 351 breakaway yards last year, and he had 13 more carries this year. The best way to neutralize an aggressive pass rush and maybe take advantage of Alabama pinning their ears back a little bit too much at McCarthy because your offensive line is a little bit unstable is to run the ball in those created seams. And Edwards was that guy, probably still can be that guy, but he hasn't been that guy this year.
Yeah, Brett, I don't know which team is going to win this game. I'll get to what my model thinks. I'll get to what my gut says. But both these teams, they're very strong, and they bring things to the table that could counteract each other. Michigan has been my number 1 power-rated team since the midpoint of the regular season. But I mentioned earlier their power rating of 28.0. That's not quote-unquote dominant. They haven't separated from the rest of the field. We don't have a dominant team or group of teams in college football in 2023. That 28.0, that would rank number 3 in last year's data set, number 3 in 2021, number 4 in 2020, number 5 in 2019. I mean, this wouldn't even be a top 4, quote, best team in 2019, and number 3 in 2018. The last time the number 1 team in my power ratings had a rating of 28 or worse was 2015. So we didn't have, an Alabama of the early CFP era. We didn't have a Clemson of 2016 or 2018. We didn't have Georgia of the last 2 years this year in the college football field. But Michigan did rise to the top, and they stayed there for the second half of the year. They have the number 1 offense and the number 7 defense per my numbers. The Wolverines have the highest floor of any team in college football. Like they don't play poor games, and I'm not sure they have significant weaknesses. You've outlined some areas where they've struggled. I don't think there are weaknesses that can't be overcome or that can be exploited just over and over to the point where they can't win a game because of them. The 7-point win at Maryland, who I have power rated as a top 35 team, is probably their worst performance of the season if we're looking at everything outside of maybe some sleepwalking that they had in the first halves of games against really bad opponents early in the year. But even in that game against the Terps, you can say Michigan likely had an eye already turned towards the game against the Buckeyes the following week. So really just a
and
solid
came off of the
team.
Penn State game too.
What's that?
That was sandwiched in between the Penn State and Ohio State game. So that's
true.
You can almost write that off.
You're right. Coming off the Penn State game, that was the ultimate sandwich game, and it was probably the one that they looked the poorest in, and they didn't even look poor, but that was the one they probably performed the worst. Certainly none of those dynamics are at play here when you've had a full month to prepare. Depending, Brett, on the source that you use for this, Michigan has at least 9 national championships to their name. But per my historical power ratings, which again I have estimates going all the way back to the beginning of college football now, this is the best team ever fielded in Ann Arbor.
Wow.
I mean, from a power rating standpoint, this could be the best Michigan team that we have ever seen. Now, if they go out and get blown out by Alabama by 4 touchdowns, that power rating is subject to change. If they blow out Alabama by 4 touchdowns, then it's like it almost doesn't matter what happens in the championship game. Like, this will be the best team in my data set that we've ever seen from Michigan. On the other side, not only is this not the best Alabama team that we've ever seen, Brett, this is actually the worst Alabama team, at least per my power ratings, since 2013. I mean, it's been a decade since Nick Saban fielded a team from a power rating standpoint that was as weak, if you will, quote unquote, as this one. But I said it time and time again this year. Alabama did not need to be better than the previous versions of itself. I said the same thing about Georgia. All the Crimson Tide had to do was be better than the teams on their schedule here in 2023. And outside of that Week 2 game against Texas, that's exactly what Alabama was this year. I said Michigan has the highest floor of any team in college football. Alabama has the highest ceiling, at least of the teams in the CFP. I mean, all you have to do is look at their last 2 weeks. 1 week after needing a 4th and goal from the 31 to beat a 6-6 Auburn team. And I get it. That's your big rival. You're on the road. You always seem to struggle in Jordan Hare. Like, I understand. But at the end of the day, that Auburn team was coming off of a loss to New Mexico State. 1 week after that, though, after that performance, Alabama took down the 2-time reigning national champs in Atlanta. So The Tide's defense, they're currently number 7 in my unit rankings. They have been ranked as high as number 4 this year. And while the offense bottomed out at number 29 early in the year, they've rebounded all the way back up to number 12 now. So if you look at the two matchups, it's the number 7 Michigan offense against the number 7 Alabama defense. And then on the other side, we've got the number 1 Michigan defense going up against the number 12 Alabama offense. So that, to me, is probably the side of the ball that there's a little bit more separation. My model makes it Michigan minus 4.5. Based strictly on that, the recommendation would obviously be to lay the points with the Wolverines. But with a month to prepare, and I think the longer, and there's data to back this up, the longer time you have to prepare, the more it favors the underdog. We're just not used to seeing Alabama in the underdog role. They're usually the hunter, not the hunted. Well, they're usually the hunted, not the hunter. Now they are the hunter, which we haven't seen from Alabama in a very long time. With a month to prepare, I think it's more likely than not that we get Alabama's A game. And if both teams play their A game, Alabama does have that higher ceiling. Michigan just hasn't played anything less than a B game all year, if you want to call it that. Alabama, they've had some real ups and downs, but at their top end, they are a better and more dangerous team than Michigan. If we do get Alabama's A game, which I think we will, I think it's enough to win the game outright. So the model says Michigan minus 4.5. My gut says Alabama covers and wins. I mean, there's just I've seen this so many times before with Nick Saban, and you said it. They've only lost one semifinal game in the CFP era, and that was to Ohio State as 9.5-point favorites, which is certainly not the scenario here. And that Ohio State team just took everybody by surprise with Cardale Jones coming in and getting hot. This Michigan team, for better or worse, and it's usually for better, we know exactly what they are. And I agree with what you were saying. Like, J.J. McCarthy hasn't had to win a game this year. I mean, the last time that Michigan asked J.J. McCarthy to be special and go win a game was probably the TCU game last year, which they were unable to do. It was a great game, and it certainly wasn't J.J. McCarthy's fault that they lost. It was a great game and just came down to TCU, had one more possession, and they were able to get it done. J.J. McCarthy's a really good player. I mean, he's being projected first-round draft pick. Who knows if he might come back? But he's a really, really good player. He hasn't been asked to win games because they haven't needed him to. He's going to be asked to win this game at some point. Could be in the third quarter, could be in the fourth quarter. I don't know when it will be. He'll be asked to make a couple of big plays. Will he be able to do it against this Alabama team who does have a really strong defense? This will be, believe it or not, this will be the best opposing offense that Michigan has faced all year, just at number 12. The Ohio State offense, which we thought was going to be really, really good, certainly tailed off by the time they played Michigan. On the same side of the ball, though, this is obviously going to be the best defense that Alabama offense has faced all year, too, ranking number 1 in the entire country. So that side of the ball, it's going to be a really, really good matchup, and I'm excited to see what Milroe can do. But it comes back to McCarthy. He's going to have to win this game at some point. He has the talent to do it, and I do think having Jim Harbaugh there on the sideline, which he's only been there for about half the games this year, he will have a calming influence on J.J. McCarthy in these big moments. I'm very, very excited to see if he's able to do it or if that Alabama defense will be able to get just one stop that they'll need at some point late in the game.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much we hit on all the different things, all to say, and I think we both are saying similar things, that these teams are nearly indistinguishable. It's a very difficult handicap. These teams do the same things well, have similar deficiencies on both sides of the football. But the way I really look at it, if we're really boiling it down, Alabama has the coaching experience edge, of course, with Nick Saban and that proven college football playoff semifinal record. But you know what? Michigan has all the momentum in the world right now. It's the us versus everyone mentality. When's the last time we really, really, really saw the us versus everyone? You can ask TCU fans, you can ask other fans, they might say that, but like nationally, where people have accepted it, Ohio against the world in 2014, that famous t-shirt that was in the stands there for that game, and that's what led, ironically, to a win over Alabama. I think I lean Michigan to win this game, simply because I trust their quarterback more. I trust J.J. McCarthy more, and I trust Jalen Milroe to be sensible, because Jalen Milroe is the three-pointer layup type of offense. And I think Michigan's just a bit more multiple with it, and they have more multiple options to go to, especially in the backfield. So I lean money line, but I'm going to wait until closer to kickoff because I want to see where this number goes. The public money, I think I think is going to favor Alabama. And you know what? This is a game where recreational betting will move the line quite a bit because there's enough action on there where they will move it. So I think this line's only going to get shorter. I don't expect Michigan to grow as a favorite, so I'm going to be patient here. Ultimately take Michigan on the money line because we have such a low total. And then also I'm looking for live opportunities based on early momentum. This is a game where Michigan could come out, and it's very clear that Alabama has the perfect game plan for them and is ready to kick them in the mouth. And then in that case, you know, if you're caught with the Michigan money line pre-live ticket and they go down 17-0 early on, it's like, oh, shoot. So that's something I'm waiting until close to kick. I lean Michigan. Live opportunity is probably going to be your best bet here.